So, as everyone knows by now, on Friday, Kevin Garnett announced his retirement from the NBA after a 21-year career. And I just wanted to kind of give my perspective on that because it's a historical event. You know, we've seen Tim Duncan, Kobe Bryant, and now Kevin Garnett all hang it up in this same offseason. That's three of conservatively the best players in NBA history. You know, as many have been pointing out, the 2021 Hall of Fame class is set up to be by far the best Hall of Fame class that's ever come through. I saw a graphic on ESPN that between the three of them, Garnett, Duncan, and Kobe have 48 All-Star game appearances, and that's way more than any group of three people that have ever gone into the Hall of Fame in any one season. I think the previous record was like 34. So, I mean, they're smashing it. So, but anyway, so even though we had several legends hang it up, Garnett is the man of attention for today and the one I want to speak of a bit more. As some of you may know, if you've followed any of my writing or whatnot, I've never hidden it that Garnett is my favorite basketball player, really of all time. You know, but it's interesting because he didn't take the normal route to become somebody's favorite. You know, he's not from my home team. You know, I'm not from Minnesota. I'm not from Boston. You know, that I don't have any direct connection to him except for what I've seen on the court. And that is what made him become my favorite. Actually, the only reason I was even paying attention to Minnesota is that when I went to Georgia Tech in 1995, I got there the same year as Stephon Marbury. And Marbury was like, he electrified Tech's campus. I mean, he was like the man. You know, Georgia Tech's basketball team was exciting. And, you know, I was in athletic housing, so I would, you know, see him around the way sometimes, run into him sometimes. And so when he went to the pros, he got drafted by Minnesota, I started paying attention to the Timberwolves because of Marbury. But as I was watching them play, you know, I was watching this crazy 7-foot, like, energetic Energizer bunny just everywhere on the court, you know, and I'd be looking at, and Garnett also came out of high school the same year that I did, but I never really followed him outside of, you know, the buzz about him being the first high school pick in a long time. But I was watching, and I mean, this dude would be like everywhere. He'd be jumping on tables and screaming and diving for loose balls and guarding point guards and then guarding centers and handling the rock and taking jumpers and throwing no-look passes. And it was just like, I would just be watching this dude. And it was funny because, you know, the late 90s was kind of the end of the Jordan era. And then, you know, kind of the early 2000s was Kobe and Shaq were getting all the attention. But I'd be like, man, is anybody paying attention to this dude? Does anybody see what I'm seeing? Like, this dude is crazy. He's amazing. And so, and I think more than anything was that when I used to play basketball when I was little, my mom used to always tell me she didn't care if I was the leading scorer. She didn't care how many points I had. She didn't care how many rebounds I had. She didn't care about none of the stats. What she wanted to see was me go out there and play my hardest all the time. She was like, if I did that, then she didn't care what the outcome was. And so, you know, because of that, I would watch how KG played, and he was always giving his all. You know, the NBA season is really, really long. Some people feel like it's too long. And so, you know, for a guy to be out there 82 games, I had the NBA, you know, satellite package so I could watch all the games. And every game, it'd be like a Tuesday, January game against the Bucks or the Clippers, and it didn't matter. Like, he was just always on. He was always giving it his all. All of the other great players that, you know, that were drafted in the 90s, that were in that post-Jordan era, I would watch them all, and none of them were impacting the game as much in as many ways as Garnett was. So you got this great elite superstar player in a market that nobody's paying attention to on a team that's not good enough for him. And so nobody really realized what he was. And then he went to Boston. And by the time he got to Boston, he no longer was at his peak. But even still, you know, I remember there was buzz when him and Ray Allen got traded to Boston that, hey, you know, there's a big three. But there wasn't a big expectation that they were just going to, you know, kill the league. I mean, I know ESPN had this panel of like 25 of their NBA writers, and I think maybe one or two of them thought that Boston would even be able to compete or to win the East, and I don't know if any one of them had them winning the title. Meanwhile, as soon, and this is true, like Chris Liss, if you watch it, you know it's true. As soon as I heard that Kevin Garnett got traded to Boston, but I called my partner who was going to Vegas, or he was going to be in Vegas that weekend. I was like, you have to put some money. Like, this is easy money. The odds at the time were 25-1. I was like, with Kevin Garnett joining that team, having a good cast for the first time in his career. And outside of the three of them, the rest of the cast was unproven. But I was like, I don't care. They're about to destroy the league. And so, that was the easiest money I've ever won in Vegas. Because it's just, even Vegas didn't realize quite how good he was. So, I mentioned that, I would get into those internet arguments over, Garnett versus Duncan, Garnett versus Kobe, Garnett versus Dirk. And for the most part, I would be on an island. Like, if you went to Real GM's message board in the 2000s, there was pretty much only one poster, Drizza, who was trying to get people to see how good Garnett was. And then something funny happened. The NBA went through its version of the Moneyball era that baseball had gone through about a decade before. And all of these, eggheads, and I include myself in that list, started really examining the game in kind of ways that had never been examined before, looking for ways to really group the box score stats into ways to make them more efficient. But even beyond that, looking outside the box score, looking at kind of impact stats, looking at correlating a player's presence on the court with his team's scoring margin, to really show which players were making the biggest impact on the court. And lo and behold, as more and more of these studies were coming out, like shockingly, all of them had Kevin Garnett right at the top of the most impactful players in the NBA. And for many of the analysts or, writers in the field, that's like a shocking result, to the point where I think some of those stats, some of the plus minus stats haven't been as universally accepted as maybe they should be, because for too many people, it's, they're like, how can this body of stats say that Kevin Garnett is the best player of the last 20 years, that only LeBron and maybe, Lakers Shaq is even his peer, that he's better than Duncan, that just, point blank, that he's better than Dirk, that he's better than Kobe. Kobe was supposed to be the next Jordan. So the fact that this impact approach consistently keeps putting Garnett at the top, I think is maybe heard it in the mainstream. But for me, those were finally showing quantitatively what I was seeing all along. What if you were kind of paying attention to the Timberwolves and to the whole ride of Garnett through the NBA, you got to see it, that, legitimately, this man was the most valuable player in the NBA for the last 15, 20 years. That while now LeBron versus Jordan is kind of the buzz for, can LeBron be on that list of the best players of all time? And of course, Kobe just Kobe just retired, and he's put into that category, Duncan. Most don't really have Garnett quite at that level, and he really should be. Like, he really was that good. He really was that valuable on the court. And then off the court, his influence was just as large. Jay Adande on ESPN has an article running right now about Garnett, how Garnett retires as the most influential player of his generation. He cites Garnett's preps to pros and how big a deal that was. There were people that did that back in the 70s, 60s and 70s maybe, but the NBA and the ABA merged in the late 70s. And that kind of marked the beginning of the modern NBA. And no player had ever gone preps to pros in the modern NBA until Garnett did. Then after he did, you saw Kobe and Tracy McGrady and Jermaine O'Neal, and then eventually LeBron, Dwight Howard, all following in his footsteps. But he was the trailblazer for that, and it changed the game. In a way that's not as positive. Garnett is also, his contract that he signed in 1998 that made him the highest paid player in the NBA is often cited as the one that made the NBA say, okay, well, we've got to change our collective bargaining agreement. And, there have been a series of big CBA negotiations, lockouts, that has just fundamentally changed the financial structure of the NBA. And again, that came about largely because of Garnett. But even beyond those things, Garnett has changed the way that NBA big men play. Before him, in the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 60s, NBA history, the NBA was considered a big man's game, and the big man was supposed to play in the paint. And it would be two of them. There'd be a center and a power forward. They were supposed to protect the rim, get rebounds, be rough and physical, and that's what they were supposed to do. Garnett was one of the first to really break that mold, to show that, a NBA, a 7-footer could be skilled. A 7-footer, you could run your offense through him, is almost like a point guard. He could create spacing by stepping out and hitting the jumper. He could defend around the rim, but he could also defend all the way out to the half-court line. That NBA 7-footer needed to be skilled the same way that a perimeter player, a guard, would be. And if you look at today's NBA, not just the stretch four, all big men are getting to be like that. The best big men of the current generation, from Karl Anthony Towns in Minnesota to Anthony Davis, is just the prototype of what big men need to be to succeed in today's NBA. Draymond Green, all kind of come from the way that Garnett played the game. So, this is kind of a bittersweet and kind of historic time for me, and it should be for the rest of the NBA. And I don't know that it's really, obviously it got attention on ESPN and NBA TV and on the internet when Garnett announced his retirement. But by the next day, it's all about college football, onward and upward, and I don't know if people quite recognize the magnitude of what the game is losing. KG, the big ticket, that's as good as we've seen in the NBA in the time I've been watching. And so I hope you guys enjoyed that career, because, just like all of the legendary greats that have gone before and that, are currently on their way out now, you'll never see another Kevin Garnett walking through that door. So anyway.